if you're not getting in, as you mentioned, right, cycle after cycle after cycle, one of the things to potentially look at is, do I need new letter writers? Ask Dr. Gray Pre-Med Q&A brought to you by Blueprint MCAT. How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
I am wonderful. What can I help you with?
So I actually had a lot of questions about my gap year because
Okay.
I'm currently in my gap year. And it's mostly like I was in a stage of like a hiatus. And I was wondering if this hiatus would negatively affect my medical application. So to go like into depth, so basically my story after I graduated in December of 2020, I actually moved to Korea back with my family. And during that time, like I did some work as an English tutor. And after I did some work, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go start like getting back into like MCAT studying and stuff like that. But in that process, actually my last living grandparent passed away from a stroke. And then this just completely destroyed me and my studying momentum. And I just didn't want to do anything.
Yeah.
Like from there on, I
Understandable.
was like, I don't want to study. I don't want to do anything. I just want to be with my family
Yeah.
back in Korea. I just want to be with my friends and just kind of like wind down a bit and just maybe I'll like in a few months later I'll start get back into studying.
Mhm.
But then eventually it didn't really happen because I moved back and forth from Korea to the States a couple times, like 2 or 3 times in that span of a year and a half. And then in that process, I also lost my aunt to COVID. And again, that feeling of like helplessness and not wanting to study came back to me.
Yeah.
And now I am here. And I did nothing to prepare for medical school during that time.
Okay.
And now that I'm going back into preparing for medical school and studying for the MCAT and doing like getting clinical experience and volunteering, I feel like that whole time is has been a bad time for my medical application and that it's going to negatively affect me.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I I like still want to be a doctor and I still want to do this whole process. I'm just not sure how I need to combat this
Yeah.
and to get me to go moving forward into my process.
Isn't it? So first off, I'm sorry that you lost your last living grandparent and your aunt dying with COVID from COVID. Isn't it like ridiculous the pressures that we're putting on students to get into medical school, that you living life, going through a normal mourning period of losing two family members, and you're like, oh my gosh, how's this going to affect my ability to get into medical school? Like, so I understand that fear, but I think you'll be okay. I think you are allowed to be a human being. You are allowed to mourn and process and go through whatever you need to go through. And it's okay that you took some time off from quote unquote preparing for medical school and continuing to do these activities that are going to show you want to be a physician. A lot of schools will ask on their secondaries, like, if you've graduated, what have you been doing? And you'll put in there that you took some time away to be with family and to care for yourself after losing two family members. And the far majority of schools are going to understand that. And the ones that don't understand that, you want to run far away from anyway. You don't want to go to that school, because if something else happens and you lose another family member, just life happens, right? They're not going to be empathetic enough to go, hey, like, take care of yourself. We'll be here when you get back.
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna want to go, well, sorry, you can't mourn, you can't process, you have to be here and be a student, and you are not allowed to have a life outside of here.
Yeah, it was just like a big worry for me because I just heard from like since I was a pre-med and I had a bunch of pre-med friends, they all kept telling me like, you have to be doing something during your gap year. If you don't, that's gonna be like they're going to look down upon it. It's going to look like you're not trying.
Yeah.
And so that just like really scared me. Like, so.
And I say that. I say that as well. I say that you should keep your foot in the door in the medical world. It doesn't have to be your gap year. You can go explore and do things, and right, it's never an either or. And life happens sometimes, and that's okay. Right? You didn't plan to not do anything. It just happened because you were taking care of yourself and being with family and friends and all of that stuff. That's okay. Yeah. And since then, it sounds like you've gotten back into the swing of things. You're getting clinical experience and shadowing and all this other stuff, and that's perfectly fine. There's no perfect way to do this.
Yeah, that actually kind of gives me a lot of hope, because I was like really worried about this, and I didn't really have anyone to ask about like, oh, how are they going to see this? Like, this hiatus, like, is it gonna be bad on me and stuff like that? But now that I see it, and hear your advice, it's definitely giving me a lot of hope. Yeah.
I think you should have a lot of hope. And again, as I mentioned earlier, there may be some schools out there that don't like it. Oh well, you're not going to please everyone. I think people will have some compassion and some empathy to your story, and will understand why you took some time off, and there's some gaps in clinical experience and this and that. It's perfectly fine.
Okay. All right. That sounds great. I actually do have a little bit of more questions I wanted to ask. Like, since I am like starting and like now with like clinical experience and taking my MCAT, like, if I were to apply next cycle, would it be okay to apply next cycle? Or do you think I need to build more upon my application, like get more volunteering and shadowing and like, or maybe like pursue a postbac or SMP and then apply? Or is it wise to apply like the next cycle?
Yeah. So for context for people watching or listening, next cycle is basically almost a year from now, a little less than a year from now as we're recording this. So assuming you are doing your clinical activities and other stuff, you'll have basically a year under your belt when you apply, and then anticipating out those hours as well from when you start medical school. I think that's plenty. I don't think there's any concern where you have to take another year to continue to do it. I think COVID obviously has negatives, right? You lost your aunt to COVID. I lost my grandfather to COVID. Like, there are bad things because of COVID, and the silver lining with COVID is that a lot of students didn't get clinical experience. They didn't get shadowing because of COVID, and are trying to play catch up and scramble to do these things. So I think a year under your belt is perfectly fine to do that. Now, the question of an SMP or a postbac, I actually answered this recently, again, as we're recording this on the pre-mid years, episode 491. I had a great conversation with the director of a postbac program. And postbac and SMPs are really just, do you need grade repair? Or are you a career changer and you don't have any science classes? If your GPA is not good enough that it doesn't give medical schools the confidence that you are academically able to do well in medical school, then you need a postbac or an SMP. But if it's just lack of activities that you need, you don't need to go spend money on a postbac or an SMP program.
So if like my GPA isn't the greatest, but I can tell you it's not like the lowest.
Okay.
It's like in the average to lower.
Okay. Any trends in there? Upward trend, downward trend?
The thing is, there were a lot of upward and downward and upward and downward.
A roller coaster.
Trend. Yes, basically.
Yeah.
And so I'm like,
so you may need a postbac.
To show them that I can definitely be competitive enough for medical school. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. That potentially would be a good reason to a postbac without looking really super in depth at your grades right now as we're recording this. If you haven't checked out Mapped App yet, you can go, Mapped App Pro lets you can enter all of your grades, all of your activities, all that stuff, and then chat with one of our Mapped advisors, and they can give you some more detailed feedback.
And I also was wondering, like, since the COVID period, there have been a lot of like online programs for Postbac and online programs, SMPs, and stuff like that. And I was wondering if those are actually okay to apply to,
Yeah.
or is it better to do it in person? Like, would medical schools look down upon you applying for an online Postbac?
I think historically the answer has been in person is better.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably say still in person is probably the safest bet, not necessarily better, but the safest bet that will be accepted at the majority of schools.
Mm-hmm.
And COVID happened, right?
Yeah.
Medical schools taught their students online. So it would be very hypocritical for a medical school to go, we're not going to accept an online postbac program. We're not going to accept an online SMP. They are not good enough. I'm like, didn't you teach your medical students online for a semester or two? So it would be very hypocritical. And humans being humans, they're going to have their biases. They're going to have their preferences. And so in person is preferable and probably safest. But if an online program works the best for you, then it would probably be good enough at most schools.
Okay. All right. That sounds great. And I have a lot of questions. I'm so sorry.
Let's keep going.
Yeah, but it's just nice having like someone to answer all these questions and to get a solid answer instead of just being, oh, who can I ask? Like, I don't have an advisor now that I'm in the gap year, and there's no one who's going to help me.
Yeah. So again, one of the benefits of a little plug here for Mapped App Pro is through the application. So it's a web-based application. You can chat with one of our advisors, and it's $10 a month. So it's super cheap.
Yeah, it is super cheap. Dang, I might look into that. And then so I have like two more questions.
Yeah, let's go.
So the second to last question is, now that I am getting back into like doing shadowing and stuff, I'm actually in the States right now, but I'm going to Korea in a month. And since I'm getting a lot of my shadowing experience out of country in Korea, I don't know how like American medical schools will look at that.
Yeah.
I think that they might want more shadowing experiences in America instead of Korea.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, I do also want, if there's ever a possibility, to work in Korea, if that's the chance too. And so I was wondering how, like, you thought about this, and if it is like, if I should actually reach out and go do more American shadowing at some hospitals.
Yeah, so US shadowing I think is preferred. It's the ideal, because the whole point of shadowing is to understand the day in the life of a doctor. And while doctoring and taking care of patients is going to be very, very similar, what you are not seeing in Korea is the complicated US healthcare system and the day-to-day struggles that physicians have taking care of patients because of our broken healthcare system. And so that's an important part of this process, is making sure that you understand, that you know what you're getting yourself into.
All right. And then my last question. This has actually been like a huge worry for me too, which was about professor recommendation letters. So I was always wondering, like, people who applied cycle after cycle after cycle, like, how did they get their letter of recommendations? Like, did they ask the same professor, or was it more like they asked different professors? And like, because I'm afraid that some professors might like reject your requests after asking so many times.
Yeah.
And so what was like the process of other students that you've seen?
So typically you're not getting a new letter, right? It's so when you go back to the same professor for a letter, because you're applying again, you're going, number one, with the confidence that they wrote you a strong letter in the first place. If there's any doubt that that person wrote you a strong letter, then I wouldn't ask them again the next cycle. So best case scenario is you are confident that that person wrote you a strong letter of recommendation. You've stayed in contact with that person over the application cycle, and you reach back out to them and say, "Hey, Professor Smith, I'm sorry I didn't get in this cycle. Can you resubmit your letter with just an updated date on it?" And they may want more information from you. You may want to give them more information about what you've been up to over the last year or so. So you can do that. So you're not typically having them write new letters every time. That would be a lot of extra work for them.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. The biggest thing is if you're not getting in, as you mentioned, right, cycle after cycle after cycle, one of the things to potentially look at is, do I need new letter writers? Is there an issue with my letters that is potentially one of the reasons why I'm not getting in?
Okay. And in addition to that question, like my university, a lot of my professors have very strict requirements to get letter of recommendations. And like I was planning on applying to Postbac, but it didn't happen. And I was actually like reaching out to a lot of professors that I have been in contact, but I have been to their office hours, and I did fairly good in their classes, but I was not able to acquire a letter of recommendation from them because of their strict requirement and their cutoff line. Like you had to have a 95 or above to get a letter of recommendation. And like, it's like, I feel like if I'm going to apply for medical school, I feel like I'm not even going to be able to get 2 letter of recommendation letters because of that requirement. And that's the biggest worry for me too. So I'm not really sure what to do at this point.
Yeah. I am very open about my thoughts about restricting letters, whether it's a committee letter or apparently individual letters from professors. I think it's completely irresponsible of those professors to have cutoffs like that for a letter, especially if you know them well. I think they're trying to protect their workload and go, only people with 95, and they know based on their scoring that not many students are going to be able to get that, and so they don't have to do as much work. I think is ridiculous. Letters are not, Sally got a 95 in my class, and therefore I recommend her. Letters are, I know Sally very well, and this is the type of person she is, and this is the type of doctor I think she will be, and I highly recommend her. The medical schools know the grade. They'll see the A, the B, the C, whatever. Even students who get C's in some classes have amazing letters of recommendations from that professor because they were able to work with that professor a ton, and maybe they failed their midterm for extenuating circumstances, but they work their butt off and were always in office hours and helping other students and all of this stuff. And so I think it's completely ridiculous that these professors have these cutoffs, but it is what it is. So I think at the end of the day, you can only do what you can do and just figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And be open. If you're applying to postbac programs that want letters, just be open with them, saying, hey, like this professor requires a 95 to get a letter, and so I can't get these letters that you want. What do I do?
Was one more question. Forgot. Okay. Yeah, I forgot what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, I remember now. Then if I were to ask like other people like that I've shadowed, or I actually did some scribing work from like a different company, if I were to ask recommendation letters from these people, would it actually be okay, or would it replace those letters?
It depends on the school. Yeah, every school is going to have what they require. They'll have what they will allow in replacement of their required letters. So it's just going to depend on the school.
Mm-hmm. So I'll just have to reach out to the school.
Unfortunately, yeah. Go to the website, see if they talk about it anywhere. I know Sam Houston State, very specifically, because I saw this recently. They have a thing for their letters of recommendations that says if you've been out of college for more than a year, then they allow other types of letters. So it's just going to depend on the school.
Oh, okay, I see. And that's my first time hearing that too.
Yeah,
very interesting. Yeah. All right. that was all my questions you asked.
Yeah. So the big thing for you is going to be MCAT prep. Our sponsor here at Ask Dr. Gray, Blueprint MCAT. Go check them out. Go create a free account. You get access to flashcards, to a study planner tool, to full-length one and a half-length diagnostic. So go check them out.
All right. We will definitely will.
All right. Yeah. Good luck.
All right. Thank you so much. And I definitely really value your second opinion, and it's helping me a lot through this process and giving me a lot of hope. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.